I'd like to invite everybody to settle in for our final class together, unless we do a little reunion class, which I'm also contemplating to have a reunion maybe in a month or something like that, because some of these things digest over time. So I'd like to read you a poem that was sent to me by one of our participants, Frank Muesli. I hope I'm pronouncing that right. Frank, if you're listening, thank you for sending it. And yeah, so just to get quiet for a minute. And this poem is titled, it's by Christopher Fry, and it's titled, A Sleep of Prisoners. The human heart can go to the lengths of God. Dark and cold we may be, but this is no winter now. The frozen misery of centuries breaks, cracks, begins to move. The thunder is the thunder of the flows, the thaw, the flood, the upstart spring. Thank God our time is now, when wrong comes up to face us everywhere. Never to leave us till we take the longest stride of soul man ever took. Affairs are now soul size. The enterprise is exploration into God. Where are you making for? It takes so many thousands of years to wake. But will you wake, for pity's sake? And I was attracted to read that because it's actually resonant with the notion of prayer that we that Cynthia invoked last time, especially that line. Where are you making for? It's that question, that sense of purpose, and that yearning to fulfill that purpose, even when we don't know how, that I consider a prayer. And that is, well, I'll talk about that more, because some people were a bit triggered by prayer, and in my mind, for very good reason. But a prayer doesn't depend on an external divine being to whom you can offer supplication. A prayer is a state of being. It's a state of humility, and it's a state of asking, and it's a state of preparing yourself, priming yourself for an answer. So, just want to make sure that I'm not messing up the order here. Yes, right. We're going to have our music in a minute after we talk about our first topic here. And this is something that's been coming up again and again and again. The topic of judgment, conflict, projection, and what do we do about the people who just don't get it? So, and that also will touch on the second topic we'll talk about, which is loneliness, because part of our frustration with the people who don't get it and trying to bring everybody into this new story is a loneliness at being kind of a pioneer in the new story ourselves. So this, and one thing again that we've talked about is the futility of using the tools of the old story to break the old story. To, for example, use force to change a world that is run by force, and how that actually on a deep level reinforces the assumptions that are part of the problem to begin with. And so I keep doing this all the time. Thinking, for example, that if I can overcome somebody with superior evidence and logic, then I will win and they will change their mind. And this came up a while ago, I was speaking. It was a pretty small group, and kind of offhandedly, I was talking about various ways in which what I'm calling the new story or interbeing is coming into science as well through nonlinear dynamics, complexity, quantum interconnectedness, all kinds of stuff. And one thing I mentioned was water memory. And one of the guys in the audience just rolled his eyes and snorted out loud. So that kind of triggered my aggressiveness. So I started to let him have it, very, very deftly, invoking Rustum Roy, one of the great scientists of the 20th century, who also was a proponent who believed, who described actually the nanostructure of water, and saying this isn't just, Suro Emoto, this is like serious science about it, stuff that this guy couldn't possibly have known about, but I had ready, because I've been reading some of the scientific literature, and he was, I saw him, and I noticed he was kind of shrinking back in his chair and becoming humiliated. And all of a sudden, it struck me that really what was going on was a dominance transaction. I was trying to dominate him and to have my way. And I realized that the result would probably be that he would go home feeling resentful, probably reading something on skeptic.com about how water memory is nonsense and pseudoscience, hardening his beliefs, and that the atmosphere in the whole room was becoming less trustful, less safe. So at that moment, I realized I had to switch tactics. I had to enter a different space myself if I were going to spread the kind of, am I allowed to use the word vibration? If I was going to spread the kind of vibration that we want to build a new world on. And I thought, okay, well, what if this isn't, if it's, boy, excuse me, I am catching a little cold. So, if the, boy, okay, if this is not, if it is not the case that our species will come to consensus because finally the people with the most rational, logical, evidence-based views prevail over their comparatively stupid, ignorant opponents. If that's not how the change is going to happen, then how is it going to happen? If it's not the case that my side, the right side, is right because we are smarter than the other guy, if that's not the case, if perhaps the people on both sides are equally smart, equally possessed of this fundamental human capacity that we call cognition, that we call reason, that we call logic. What if that's the case? This is, you just read the comment sections on websites, any website, liberal, conservative, they all agree that the other side is stupid. What if they're all wrong? What if people change their minds in some other way? Then what? How do people choose their stories? So the question I asked myself in that room is, well, what's hurting in this guy? Because there was pain underneath that snort of derision. There was the pain that comes from being betrayed, and therefore you're cynical, and therefore you want to protect yourself. So that was the question I asked, what hurts? And I realized that probably what it was, or maybe what it was, is that water memory, it evokes this universe where something like water can have a memory, where something like water is alive, where something like water is a self, where the whole world is magical, the whole world is intelligent, the whole world is conscious, the whole world is living. We're not alone in the universe. That is a knowledge that comes naturally to a 2-year-old. Last time you guys kind of met my 2-year-old, he came in and he had just been taken from the car where he had been napping. He was crying, but Stella had him. And anyway, his name's Carrie. And for him, it is completely natural to ask, what does my teddy bear want? He kind of takes for granted that this kind of non-separation between self and universe, his world is a living world. And the same is true from what I've been told and from what I've experienced with indigenous worldviews too. They don't see themselves as the sole possessors of beingness. But we, growing up in the old story, we've had that knowledge crushed repeatedly. So anything that reawakens it is threatening, because what if it gets crushed again? Better be safe instead, better be cynical, better guard ourselves against any suggestion that our secret hope might be true. So I spoke to that a little bit, and the man got up and left. So it didn't work. But the other people in the room afterwards told me that was the most powerful moment when I spoke to what hurts. So I'd like now to, we had one of the people on the thread contribute something that I felt was very relevant to this idea. So I'd like to bring Rod on right now of Saskatoon, Saskatchewan. And Rod had a beautiful little story about his nephew. So Rod, you want to come on bring you onto the mic?
Good morning, Charles.
Good morning. Thanks for coming on.
Well, it's a pleasure. It's an unexpected pleasure. So yeah, I'm happy to be here.
Yeah. So tell us the story.
You want the long story or the long version or the short version?
Well, not super long, but I kind of like the way you told it on the thread. But...
Well, it started with an exchange that happened on Facebook. My daughter posted an item regarding Monsanto and Roundup, and an announcement by the World Health Organization that there are now evidence showing that Roundup, which is Monsanto's cash cow, is likely the cause of cancer. And so she posted it on her Facebook page. My daughter is an environmental agricultural grad. She lives in Africa, in Ghana, and farms on an oil palm farm. I made some kind of comment, agreeing with and liking the post that she'd made. Whereupon one of my nephews, who's a farmer himself, came on with quite a different point of view. Suggesting that without Roundup, we would be unable to continue with modern farming practices. He made some comment about GMOs, which indicated that he was confusing GMO genetic modification with traditional plant breeding. So I felt that I had to correct him on that. So, of course, I made my comment, and he came back again saying that, in fact, I've actually got it, he responded saying that he agreed, that he's not sure that he could make a living and retire at all doing his farming organically. As far as genetic modification, cross-pollination, grafting, etc., they all qualify in my mind as much as jiggling genomes. So, yep, don't get me wrong. I don't want to poison the world. I farm. I love it. I work in dirty oil to support it. I'm 50. I'm white. I like cops, but I feel like scum of the earth on social media. And so when he responded like that, I could see right away there was a hurt inside him. He was feeling defensive, but he was also feeling vulnerable. I sensed that he was really feeling that vulnerability, and I couldn't just let that go like that. So, and this is it's like you in your public situation. It's not an appropriate thing to be carrying on in public. So I turned it around into a private message and said to me, we should get together and talk about these things over a few beers. And it was clear that he knows that there's a problem with what he's doing, but he can't see a way out of it. He just can't see an alternative. Ironically, this week, in fact, yesterday, another post showed up on Facebook that comes from a post rather about a farming operation that's within 45 minutes from where he farms, of a couple that are farming organically. They're growing vegetables way up north here in the North Country where it's cold for 8-9 months out of the year. They're growing vegetables year round in a greenhouse that everyone said couldn't happen. And so I'm assuming he's going to have seen that post, and he's going to say, hey, wait a minute, what's going on there? Because he wants to see the options. He wants to see the possibility. He went on in his response to me. He said if I ever posted my beliefs about some touchy subjects, I get pinned as a racist redneck, which I'm not. I'm just honest. But because I'm a 50-year-old white man who works hard, pays taxes, etc., I got to keep it to myself, but it gets harder and harder. I don't necessarily disagree with you, but I just fail to see options in some cases. I'm not a huge fan of Monsanto, and I likely will be going back to more summer following. I never liked spraying crop that is ready to be food. So he sees the dilemma that he's in, and I think he's not alone. I think there's a lot of people that are in that same dilemma. We know that we're polluting the environment when we drive our cars around town, and we continue to do it, myself included. The list of things that we do that we know is not correct environmentally, the list is huge.
So Rod, I just want to, I want to ask you to stay in the line for a minute, but I want to comment on a couple things about this. Sure. It seems like a lot of activists they won't say this out loud, but they kind of have this assumption that the farmers like your nephew, they're kind of these brutes, who are just they just don't care, they're ideologically rigid and so on and so forth. But when you actually have that kind of conversation, that story becomes impossible to maintain. And here, the hurt, like what hurts, that question was kind of answered in what he said. But I feel like the scum of the earth on social media, and that feeling of being stuck. Like I don't want to do this really, but I want to. I don't like Monsanto either. I want to find an option, but what is the option? So that feeling stuck and that feeling defensive. And I want to relate this to the Baltimore riots actually too in a minute.
Exactly. Because
here are these white guys that get demonized in the liberal press and on social media, and with the idea that if we only could shame them enough, they would go crawling back into the holes that they came from with their tails between their legs. But that's so violent. It's so brutal. What kind of world are we creating from that? what happens is they go back into their holes, and they're just nursing this anger and resentment and cheering when the cops and strengthening the story that validates them. Because if they're being attacked, then the only story that validates them is the story that their attackers must be evil. Their attackers must be, supporting the thugs, and all the other stuff. If you read the conservative commentary on the Baltimore riots, for example, that's a good versus evil narrative too. Both sides having a good versus evil narrative. So if both sides could start with that question, what hurts? And this is how I would maybe engage a conservative person. Like, they say, well, those people just don't respect authority. Okay, well, why don't they respect authority? Has authority earned their respect? What are they angry about? Baltimore used to be an industrial city. You could get a blue-collar job, and one person could raise a whole family on a blue-collar factory job. Now the only job for the enterprising young man in a lot of those places is dealing drugs. And it's pretty hopeless, and like, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. Can we understand where people are coming from? And also the white guys. So one of the narratives here in the liberal press and the political left is to point out the hypocrisy of the media, which makes this huge deal about the black riots. But when white people riot after like a football game or something like that, then, oh, that's just celebration. That's no big deal, because these people have no right to riot. These are the privileged people. These are the white people. What right have they to riot? But actually, fundamentally, this system doesn't work for anybody, white or black. And a beautiful life is not a life built on the oppression of others. That is intolerable as well. And I guess I just want to, affirm, like, we're all in this together. And I just really appreciate the way that you reached out to your nephew like that, because when he feels safe, when he feels that he's not being attacked, when he feels that he's being heard, then he'll be open to a different story, to receiving different information. Like, I just posted last month an article on The Guardian about regenerative agriculture. There are guys in your area, in the Great Plains, that are doing organic no-till agriculture and making way more money than the conventional guys, So as long as, and if you can suggest that from the perspective of a friend rather than from the perspective of, I'm going to defeat you, I think change could happen a lot faster.
Yeah, I agree.
Roger, do you have anything else you want to follow up on?
Not really. I think no. You've captured it, and
right.
I think we have to. As you say, we have to. We can't get to where we want to go if we use the old methods of the old story, and so we've got to find ways, and then they're not easy sometimes, but we find ways to approach things in a different way, in a way that is accessible and acceptable to everyone.
Yeah. One of the maybe I'll just add one more thing. So thanks, Rod.
Thank you.
And so we're going to transition in a minute onto Simon here, but one of the themes again that's come up in the course is disrupting the story, and the power that we access from letting go of the story. And I was just thinking about how the Baltimore riots started. Basically I read this in Mother Jones. Basically there was a rumor going around that, some gangs were going to reenact The Purge, which was some movie or TV show or something like that, or video game. I don't know what it was, but they were going to, rampage and kill a bunch of cops, et cetera, et cetera. And the cops like took this rumor seriously, and so they came and shut down the buses, wouldn't let kids who wanted to come home from school get on the bus, wouldn't let them get them on, the rapid transit, et cetera, and basically showed up in riot gear, and 99% of the kids just wanted to go home, and they weren't allowed to go home, and so they basically created a riot, created the very image of their fear. And I thought, like, what would have happened if they had heard this rumor and maybe taken it seriously, but responded instead by, equipping all the police with trombones and having them, and hiring some jugglers and marching down the street where the purge was supposed to happen. Like, that would have disrupted any story that, I don't know, this was just, a crazy idea I came up with, but responses like that, that look at the opponent not as an irremediably evil person, but as someone who themselves is in a story that makes them act the way they do. Like, everything could change almost without effort. So anyway, I think so just to link this to the another theme that keeps coming up in the threads, and I've been looking through the questions, and trying to, in this last episode, bring some of these things out. So one of the themes that keeps coming up is loneliness, and it's a paradox in a way that, it's not just the kind of people who are on this course that feel alienated from the norms and values of society. I think it's actually the vast majority of people feel alienated from the norms and values of society, because the norms and values of society are apparent. They're not real. They're not actually shared by very many people. If you ask them in a private moment, they won't agree with many of them. Did I tell you guys the story about Rupert Sheldrake and the I speak so much and I'm on so many things that sometimes I forget what stories I've told where. Lori, do you remember, have I told the story about Rupert Sheldrake and the room full of scientists?
I don't think you've told it on the webinar.
Yeah. So here's a good story about loneliness. Rupert Sheldrake, he described this talk he gave to a room full of scientists. And, he engages in a lot of controversial research. He's, got, master's degree from Harvard, PhD from Oxford, et cetera, et cetera. He's not someone who's that easy to write off, but he researches things like the sense of being stared at, or animals that know when their owners are coming home. So he's giving a talk, and it's not going well, giving a talk to this room full of scientists. They are, again, rolling their eyes, snorting with derision, giving him a really hard time. And he gets through it somehow, and afterwards, and the Q&A is really hostile, and then afterwards he's relaxing by the water cooler or something like that, and one by one people come up to him, the very people who had rolled their eyes at him and asked hostile questions, and they say, Rupert, I gotta tell you, actually, I kind of agree with you. I think we really got to look into these things. I think you're really onto something. The majority of people in the room, more than half, came up to him and told him things like that. Yet, in that social environment, they had to display the attitudes and behaviors of the in-group, which no one actually believed in. And I think, to a large extent, our whole society works like that, which is one reason why riots are so quick to happen. It doesn't take much for that veneer of social agreement to disappear because no one really believes in it that much. So I guess what I'm saying as far as loneliness, this is one of the things I'd like to say, is that you're not alone in your loneliness. And ultimately what hurts is that loneliness, that separation. And what people yearn for most deeply is to connect. And when they have the experience of connecting, then a lot of the other things that they hold on to as substitutes for that connection, for example, their opinions, their political beliefs, their grudges, their possessions, the things that give them a false sense of security, like those things become less compelling when the deep need is being met. And that's why magic can happen simply through giving somebody a listening, simply through trusting that the coming together that happens in that empty space. Bio talked a lot about that, you know, that the power of a witnessing to create change. So let me, I'd like to introduce now, we'll get more into the loneliness theme, but I'd like to introduce Simon Spire. Hey, Simon.
Hi, Charles.
Hey, it's really good to hear your voice.
Thanks so much for having me on. It's so good to be a part of it.
Yeah.
Honor.
Now, Simon's a musician, and like we could just like play a YouTube that's professionally recorded, you know, and the sound quality would probably be a lot better. But you know, I kind of prefer the live thing, even if it's going to be not excellent sound, because there's, again, like you're going to be playing to us, you know.
Mm-hmm.
So yeah. This will be unique. And do you want to tell us a little bit about the song you're going to play?
Yeah, sure. It's called Uncomfortable. The poem, the Christopher Wright poem you read earlier, made me think of it a little bit because I don't know if I got the title right. It was something like Awakening of the Prisoners. Is that right? Something to do with that. Anyway, I thought I heard something like that. And when we made a music video for this song, it was like a modern day rendition of Plato's Cave, Plato's allegory of the cave. So it's kind of has a prisoner theme too. But I mean, I kind of experienced this song, especially thinking of it in terms of this course, as kind of an expression of the burden of being stuck in our old stories and of being bound by some kind of identity of separation and kind of getting to the end of one's ability to remain in those stories. So I feel like there's like a deep letting go and a dissolution and a kind of death in the song, but there's also a hint of what wants to emerge, like a kind of newfound freedom that wants to emerge. So I feel like it kind of harks back to our first session on being ejected from an old story, and also kind of has a glimmer of something new as well. Mm-hmm. Should I just go for it now?
Yeah, go for it.
I see you're nodding. I'm uncomfortable in this world. I don't know how they do it. I'm uncomfortable in this world. Am I gonna get through it? 'Cause it's cold outside and dark at night. Everything I do, it's only good for messing up the world that I want to know. I'm uncomfortable in this world. I don't know how to do it anymore. I'm uncomfortable in this world. How long can I do it? I'm uncomfortable in this world. I can't bring myself to pursue it. 'Cause I'm tired of hearing all the lies, particularly mine. The only thing I still believe is belief cannot outlive time. I'm uncomfortable in this world. I don't know how to do it anymore. All the effort comes to naught, all the work and clever thought. Screw it, I don't need it anymore. A battle to world, if the world is winning. A battle behind the jail we're living. Take this thing and let it go. This thing call me, I'll watch you go. I'm uncomfortable in this world. Don't know how they do it. I'm uncomfortable in this world, and I've tried and tried to get through it. 'Cause it used to be I owned my shit, but now my shit owns me. The only thing I can control seems to play in me. I'm uncomfortable in this world, and I don't know how to do it. And the world is winning. Battle behind this jail we're living. Take this thing and let it go. This thing called me, I'll watch it go. And look what's left, it's just so. Thank you.
Wow, thank you.
Thanks, Charles.
I've always loved that song.
Thanks a lot.
Yeah.
Really means a lot to me too that you said that. Yeah.
Yeah. We'll send out a YouTube link for it.
Oh, cool. Okay, that'd be fun.
You send that to me, okay?
Okay, cool. I will. Oh, great.
I mean, that song could be an anthem for this course.
Yeah, that's what I was kind of. Yeah, I was kind of when I was deciding which song would be best to sing. I mean, that's what kind of resonated as well with the course. I mean, I didn't want it to be too dark. It's kind of a dark song, but but there is like a transformative light at the end too. But I also thought, like on another level, to me, it kind of just evokes the struggle of attempting to live in alignment with, the deepest core of one's being in the world as it is. It's just, like even, I don't know, even if you're a very, whatever it is, evolved being or whatever, it's, it's still like, sometimes it's just a struggle. And sometimes it's just not as easy as you want it to be. I don't mean struggle isn't like we have to work hard at it. I just mean, sometimes just challenging.
Yeah, I mean, to me, it feels like very validating, like you're singing, I'm uncomfortable in this world. Well, maybe it's okay that I'm uncomfortable in this world too. I battled the world and the world is winning. Is that what the lyric was?
Yeah.
Like, maybe battling the world isn't the way to go. I don't know how to do this anymore. That's like the invitation to surrender.
Yeah.
And it's a prayer too, like it was interesting. Maybe later I'll read some of the prayers out loud, but there were kind of two types of prayers that people were offering. One was essentially, I don't know how to do it. And the other was, may all beings something, something, something. The second kind is more of a blessing in a way, which might be one type of prayer. I don't know, but it's kind of, the second type is a bit more of, I know what should happen, And the other one is, I have no clue, help. And that is a kind of it's like a letting go. And when you let go, then the new thing can come. So, yeah.
Yeah, and letting go can be so, I mean, opening to the unknown in that way can be so intimidating sometimes. And sometimes you almost need to get to, I mean, like what Liz has said in session 2, we sometimes need to get pushed to the end of our limits to be willing to let go sometimes.
Well, thanks, Simon. Really great to see you. Yeah. And I want to turn now to another topic that's come up a lot. And it is very, very deeply related to loneliness. There was a thread on the forum about atheism, skepticism, oneness, that kind of stuff. And in the course, we've had different perspectives as well. I put Lissa on and followed her with Jody. Lissa comes across as being quite esoteric to some people, spiritual, and then Jody is very much in-your-face activist. And that kind of represents these two poles that are, I think, coming together and have to come together: the activist pole and the spiritual pole. Because I think fundamentally there doesn't need to be a difference. So I want to invite a couple people who have been voicing various positions in this conversation. So the first is Paco Pakuri, that's from Finland, and Paco's been super active in the forums and everything. So I'm really happy to invite Paco to be on with us right now, and so he shared something like just a really beautiful articulation in the forum. So Paco, do you want to talk a little bit about skepticism and atheism and what you posted there?
Hello, Charles.
Hello, Paco. Hi.
Yeah, thanks for the opportunity. So I was in the thread we were talking about, especially coming from the atheist point of view, because after the session with Cynthia, there were a couple of concepts that came out, like subtle activism and ideas like asking for rain and praying to the universe. So of course, there's a part of me that wants to believe this, but instantly my skeptic side, came up and said, wait a minute, why would the universe be willing to change its course of action just to please my particular needs? And especially, how could we talk about a caring universe to the thousands of people that have died from natural disasters? And how about the millions of animals living lives of misery and torture in factory farms? So the idea of a responsive and caring universe at times seems to me kind of a belief in line with anthropocentric theistic traditions. So isn't it possible that we're just switching the name God for the universe, and we are still searching for patterns and meaning in just random events? So yeah, finally, wouldn't it be more helpful and true to just admit that nature or the universe doesn't care about me and my problems? Because in reality, there are no problems and there is no good or bad. Life just is.
Yeah, beautifully put. Yeah, thank you, Paco.
Thanks, Jeff.
It reminds me, I just had a little exchange with Rabbi Michael Lerner, because I wrote this review for Tikkun. It's a magazine about, the review is of the film Aluna, which is a beautiful film. It's about the Kogi in Colombia, and they're warning for little brother, which is what they call the rest of the world.
Yeah.
And because they've seen basically the effects of the ecocide happening around them. It's affecting their own territory, their own mountains, and they're saying that if we continue doing this, the world is going to die. So in my review, I mentioned that their invitation is more than just into more cleverly caring for the environment, not being so stupid, but it's also an invitation to fundamentally see nature in a different way, because the way that they see nature is as an alive, coherent whole, like a body. And they say, you destroy this mangrove swamp here, that might be like cutting off an arm or a leg. It might be a vital organ of some sort. You can't just do that and plant tree farm somewhere else and say, well, the carbon is neutral now. Like this, yeah. The planet's not like that. And so they see nature as an interconnected whole, as alive and intelligent. And so I wrote that. And then Michael Lerner comes back and says, well, how, what about the position that you, Paco, just articulated? Like, if the universe is alive and intelligent, it must be a pretty evil intelligence, because it created the Holocaust. It created, factory farms. It created natural disasters. It created, a child dying of snake bite. Like, tragedy is everywhere. Suffering is everywhere. And I rewrote, some parts of the review and said, yeah, like, I mean, it would be only someone very separated from nature wouldn't realize that suffering or something like cruelty is built in. I mean, a mother frog lays thousands of eggs, but on average, only 2 in her whole lifetime ever grow to reproductive froghood. All the rest of them die. So, what is this intelligence? What are we talking about here? And the idea that the universe outside of ourselves is just a bunch of random, meaningless stuff. At bottom, a bunch of, whatever, subatomic particles, little masses bouncing off each other, and that's it. That is related, I think, to this feeling of loneliness. That I, the subject, the feeler, the experiencer, am alone in a universe that doesn't have any other experiencers and feelers. And this is, so much of philosophy is built on this question. Like, how do I know that even other human beings aren't just these kind of genetically programmed flesh robots that don't actually have interiority or subjectivity? How do I know it even of myself? There's this kind of existential longing for connection built into that worldview. And one way that, and so as science has told us that is the way that the world works, we've kind of reached out to somehow connect and to validate our experience of being. And I guess you could say this intuitive knowledge that we're not alone. And one way that we've done that is to invent a non-material God. But I think I said this in the session with Cynthia. I think that is just as much an abandonment of our connection with materiality and the sacredness and aliveness and intelligence of materiality as Newtonian mechanics is. So this is a state of being that I have visited myself very deeply. Alone in the universe state of being, it's all meaningless state of being, any intelligence outside of ourselves inherent in matter, that's just an invention, it's just a superstition. And there's a political dimension to this too, because to say that well, I mean, obviously, if you want to say that some higher intelligence is guiding everything, like really, and that there's goodness in the world, et cetera, that's a very kind of privileged thing to say. Like, would you be saying that if you were in, going through a genocide? Would you say that if you were in a concentration camp? Would you say that if things weren't all nice and comfortable in your life? So there's, so I think like what you're bringing up is really important, because the idea of a purposeful universe, the idea of a connected universe, the idea that when we pray for rain, something is listening, that is easy to abuse and to convert into a tool for maintaining existing power relationships politically in our world. And also an escape, perhaps, from doing things in 3D to change things. So it's like this viewpoint that you're bringing up cannot be ignored. And I think what I'll do now is I have more to say about it, but Paco, I'm going to invite you to add to it a little bit, and then I'm also going to bring,
Sure.
yeah, bring Maya up also, yeah. Paco, is there anything you want to add to it?
Oh, you more or less said it perfectly, Charles. I agree with everything.
Yeah, yeah. So we got to really like let's go into that state of being, you know? Yeah. Great. And so, okay, so now I'm going to bring up Maya too, just to kind of articulate something else. So Maya, do you want to take the mic here?
Can you hear me?
Yep, I can.
Okay, this first words, I can't see myself, but yeah, I guess ask me a question, because this is a really funny place for me to be, because I've been in Paco's shoes most of my life.
Yeah. So why are you no longer in that particular story? What happened, and where are you now?
I think I'm wavering back and forth. I can certainly hear the doubt a lot in me, so I can totally understand what Paco's saying. But if I feel, I mean, it's kind of split, a duality thing between thought and feeling, but logic brain keeps saying, no, this is ridiculous. But in my heart, in my feeling, in my body keeps saying, no, listen to something else. I can really feel it in my body. And then I think about it, and I get in my brain again, and I think, oh, this is just that whole, the negative religion stuff. You know, like I really worry about being a tool to some, you know, oh, you must just listen to some higher being and do whatever he says. And I'm like, no, I want to definitely express me. It's a very confusing place. Am I independent? Am I a bit of some larger thing? I feel lonely. I don't want to feel lonely. So to be part of something feels really, really good. And yet I don't want to be lost. I don't want to be, it's like totally paradoxical.
Yeah.
How to feel like I'm part of something and yet valued for me.
Yeah.
Yeah, I didn't answer your question at all.
That's fine. You know, one thing that's coming to mind for me is that we will never have absolute logical evidentiary proof that the world is purposeful, that there is intelligence or sacredness or consciousness outside of ourselves. No matter what evidence presents itself, we can always explain it away somehow, as coincidence, perhaps, as somebody making up stories, as pseudoscience. We can always explain it away. So one thing that we crave is this certainty, this which is ultimately not having to make a choice of belief. We want the choice to be made for us with absolute certainty. But maybe we don't get to do that. Maybe we are fundamentally choosing who we are and choosing the world that we live in. So, and this relates to the topic of how do you change people's minds, or how do people's beliefs and opinions change? Maybe there's a shift of the state of being. Something is healed, something is forgiven, something is let go of, and then another story, another belief system becomes available. Seems reasonable, even though it still isn't proven. I find that occasionally I read stuff by professional skeptics, and underneath their hostility to anything that they deem irrational. There's a longing. What they would like more than anything else would be to be absolutely convinced, to have it proven beyond a doubt. But unfortunately, such a thing doesn't exist. There is no proof beyond a doubt of anything. Richard Feynman, there's a little anecdote about him. He was, not only a great scientist, but also a pretty accomplished sleight of hand magician. So he liked to debunk things, debunk psychics, debunk whatever perpetual motion machines or something like that. And someone asked him, well, what would happen if someone presented you with he would always find the hidden wire, the hidden battery or whatever, the flaw, he would find the trick. Someone asked him, well, what would happen if someone showed you a perpetual motion machine or something like that, an over unity energy device, and you couldn't find the hidden wire, you couldn't find anything. It was flawless. Would you believe it then? And he said, no. I'm smart enough to know when I'm stupid. In other words, he was saying, no amount of evidence will convince me. And I thought that was very telling. We don't actually make our beliefs based on evidence. So this choice between, do we live in a purposeful universe or don't we? It's a choice. And Maya, you were saying you kind of go in between these, and so do I.
Yeah.
And that whichever one I gravitate to, I'm learning to recognize that it depends on, stuff in my personal life. It depends on things that are not. It's not like I collect a new data point and alter, a new, piece of evidence. So again, we're coming back to how do we change the story? And one thing I take from this is how do we create conditions where people gravitate toward another interpretation of things, toward another story, toward another belief system.
And so for me, it was also just being with people who weren't in the old story as much, spending more time with people who at first I thought, these people are really weird, but they're happy. Like I was working all these hours, I was working, 10 hours a day and just juggling everything. And here were people, and I earned a lot of money, and all these other people were earning nothing, and they were just so happy. Like, okay, something is fucked up here. Mm-hmm. And so I've really changed my life to have way more time and spend more time doing nothing, which is hard to explain. And it just trying to be guided by what feels right. Like everything you're saying. And that's why your books have been like, oh yeah, that's resonating with me. And I can't explain it to my brother, but it's resonating, and I'm choosing to believe it. If I'm stupid, at least I'm happy. And I'm not really stupid.
Yeah.
I don't know. Yeah.
Yeah. One more thing I'm just going to add to this particular conversation. Probably everybody has met someone who went through something really hard in their lives that at the time was maybe the worst thing imaginable. But then later on, in retrospect, they say that was the best thing that could have happened to me. I mean, I've met people who a heart attack was the best thing that could ever happen to him. My brother worked for him for a while. He was a real estate developer, hard-ass businessman, just drive, compete, clear cut, just like making lots of money, and then he went bankrupt in the real estate crash, and he had a heart attack, and everything fell apart. And my brother described him, he turned into this jolly old elf who would just chortle at everything and tell people to enjoy their life. And that heart attack and that bankruptcy was the best thing that ever happened to him. And so on the global level, I'm not saying that, the Holocaust or natural disasters or any of this, I'm not trying to justify them. But what I'm saying is that perhaps they are part of a larger process, a larger movement toward something. Yeah, and we don't really understand what. Maybe the Holocaust was the equivalent of a heart attack, maybe, so the question is this all a sound and a fury signifying nothing, as Shakespeare put it? Or is there a wholeness, a process, a movement toward what I call the more beautiful world our hearts know is possible? Something that, a destination that we sense, something drawing us. If so, it calls us to align ourselves in service to that thing, rather than, as Simon put it, to battle the world. Because as Simon put it, when we battle the world seems to be winning. And this touches on other themes that I write about, like the gift. Why are we here? We're here to give, because we've received so richly ourselves. Everything that we have is a gift. Our lives, our breath, our air, our water, we're so richly gifted. So of course we want to contribute to something beyond ourselves. Or I guess you could say, well, these aren't gifts at all. These are just random good fortune. And from that perspective, then what is randomly given could be randomly taken away, and I better protect. I better control. I better maximize my own self-interest. And there's a whole worldview built on that. Economics, evolutionary biology, it's all about maximizing self-interest. And that's the old story. And the new story is the story of the gift. And part of that is that there is a giver, and that our gifts are meant for something. And I think that there's more and more, this viewpoint conflicts with science less and less. As we, study systems theory and the emergence of integral wholes from randomness, from chaos underneath, we see that all things in this world move toward greater and greater organization, greater and greater complexity, greater and greater interrelated wholeness. And this is not imposed by an outside creator God. It's even more wonderful than that. It's inherent in matter itself, in reality itself. And I'm not saying that there's no such thing. I'm not saying that we understand right now all of the ways that this happens. I'm not saying that the current physical account of nature is complete. I think that there are many causal principles that we don't understand, many kinds of energy that we have not yet learned to measure, and maybe that we never will learn to measure. So I'm not saying, okay, yes, scientific materialism as we know it is complete, and there's this other thing, that there's this, but we can kind of, as a consolation prize, isn't it wonderful, isn't it a miracle that order out of chaos happens? I'm not quite saying that either, because I think that there's a lot that we don't understand. The Kogi, for example, that I'm writing this review about, they watch bubbles in the water to learn what's happening on this planet. They spend hours and hours and hours looking at the bubbles in these springs and lakes and things. And what are we going to make of that? Are they just indulging in some primitive superstition? Because of course, what could bubbles in the water tell you about what's happening on the planet? Are we going to discard and dismiss their way of knowing, their knowledge base? I mean, isn't that just another kind of colonialism, another kind of imperialism? Why are we so sure that we know, especially when the results of our knowing is the near demise of this planet? Anyway, fortunately, we don't have to know. All right. So let me move on just to Yeah. I think I'm just going to read a little bit from Sandra Taylor, who couldn't make it. She's in Australia, so she can't be on live. But just one more thing on this topic. She said, I have no difficulty in prayer calling in rain because I see that there is no separation between us and creatures and nature and earth and sun. From the initial starburst came the cells that seeded us all. Too many weird and wonderful phenomena happen on this planet. I love that we are here. I love that my spirit has a form with which to play and that the earth is receptive to us. Sitting on rocks and mountains, on rivers, has shown me that everything is alive and everything is up for a chat. Everything. Jeepers, I even talked to my car this morning, thanking her as she purred along. So here's a very animist way of being. And you know what? Just to offer something, like, what if we decide that we're going to be scientific about it? Like, what happens? What would happen if you just decided, okay, even if I'm deluding myself, I'm going to live this way. I'm just going to try it out and see how it is. I'm going to try out believing that everything is alive and intelligent. And that doesn't mean that it has a human intelligence. It doesn't mean that the forests want the same thing a human being wants, or that the planet or the mountains or the rivers are kind of human beings in disguise. I think that's actually quite a toxic way of thinking. I've been wanting to purge my house of any picture book that has anthropomorphized animals, like animals in place of people, animals wearing clothes, animals, seeing bears, any of that kind of stuff. Because I think that those are really, they are disrespecting animals, and like it's a kind of a conquest. It's we're going to make them like us. It's the same colonialism that we've done to other cultures. I think we got to stop doing that. And so it's not about projecting human intelligence or human desire or human subjectivity onto animals, plants, rivers, mountains, and so on. But it's about experiencing them, seeing them, knowing them as subjects, as beings with which we can have a relationship and not just a bunch of stuff. So try that out. What happens to your life? What happens to your state of being? And maybe you don't feel so alone anymore. You feel less lonely. And then that cynical part of you is like, but this doesn't count to feel less lonely because it's based on a fraud. It's based on a delusion. So it doesn't count. Okay. There's that, like that's a story, And where does that story come from? It comes from something that still hurts. Okay. So I give that space. That's a being too, that thing that hurts. Everything is a being. What happens to your life when you do that? What happens when even you see your life as a being, the events of your life as a being, everything that happens to you? That is, I think, the revolution that will transform our planet. So I'm grateful that these core issues are coming up for our last session. Atheism, connection, loneliness, togetherness, judgment. These are at the root. So we're about at our halfway mark here. So I'd like to, we have a short entertainment program here for our break. So yes, Bonnie, Vera Thaler has offered us a a video version of the prayer prompt that was offered. She said, just before last week's program, I took some time to meditate, to attune myself to you all and the topic of the day. I found myself surrendering my recent worldly efforts to get my prayers made visible artwork out into the world, and was faced with that bittersweet black hollow emptiness. And I just sat with it. Then as the program began, when you and Cynthia started talking about prayer, I got tears in my eyes, and I knew that I had to share my prayers with you to use on your program next week. Perhaps there's something lovely to fill the void during our 5-minute break, or however you want. So we're going to play that for a few minutes. Bonnie's website is prayersmadevisible.com. And so enjoy that. We'll be back in 5 minutes for the second half of our session today. Okay. So I think we're back on here. And just wanting to make sure that is indeed the case. So if somebody could give me feedback here.
Hey, Charles, we can hear you, but you have to turn your camera back on.
Okay. All right. Good. So I hope everyone had it's going back from their break now. So we're winding down now. Last time I in the follow-up email, I asked people to, I was asked in the session with Cynthia, I was asked what was my, my dream for this course, my hidden purpose. And I then turned that over to everybody else and solicited from all you guys what that might be for you, what questions it stirred, what truths it revealed, how it might have changed you in some way. And so I've been reading those on the forum, and I thought it might be kind of a good way to begin to bring about some closure, to have some of those shared with us. Some of the what this course was for various people. Also, but I was just saying and just thinking right now in terms of closure, again, like this was an experiment, and it feels like, to me, that it's not so, the ending of it seems a bit arbitrary. Some things, originally I had intended it to be much more of like a kind of a integral course with, I was going to offer processes, for example. The homework assignments turned out to be much more of just storytelling and questions and prompts, because the processes I thought of didn't really feel alive to me in this kind of electronic space, which is different when I do things, live. Live, I'll model the process maybe in front of a group, one person, and then people will go off into pairs and do it, and it can be really powerful. And to kind of just say, okay, now do this with your notebook, or find someone to do that, it doesn't have quite the, it didn't feel like I just wasn't getting a yes for it. And that was one of the things I've learned from this. And that's why I'm thinking, well, okay, given the state, and maybe in 10 years, the technology will be different. But I've been thinking, okay, given what I've learned about what works and what doesn't work, and what's possible with this technology, what is coming next for me? And I think I still might do some courses that are much more focused. And it'd be interesting to get people's feedback on this too. I was going to do one on food and eating, weight loss, fitness, the psychology of eating, food sanity is what it would be called. And that would have like much more structured readings, and it would be a bit more structured. I'm thinking of that. But also what's really exciting to me is kind of the idea of turning this into some kind of podcast, which has, I mentioned this already, which has a community around it. And it might be every 2 weeks. And it would include, some of them would have guests coming on. I mean, this is some of the feedback that's been confusing to me. Like, some of the feedback is like, Charles, I signed up for this course for you. I didn't want, although the guests were okay, but I mean, they were good, even great, but I really wanted to hear you more, and I wanted more of a connection with you, And then other people are saying more like, the days of the white guy broadcasting are over, want more participation and less of you, Charles. So, okay, these different things. And then there is a bit of remoteness around podcasts in general. So my vision that I'm going to be talking with Lori and Raven and Marie about, but I'll put it out to you guys too, is kind of this. I'm not sure if there are podcasts like this, but sometimes there would be a guest on the podcast, and it'd be kind of like a conversation with Charles on some topic. Others would be maybe having just people come up and doing like processes with them publicly. That could be sometimes pretty intense, working with somebody one-on-one. Other times they would be talking about current events, and kind of doing what I ordinarily would maybe do on a blog or something like that. Maybe inspired a little bit by Russell Brand. He's just taking some current events and here's what he thinks about it. So just like, and like the reason that I would do it is because it just seems kind of fun to do that. But then there would also be forums around it. It wouldn't just be watching a show every 2 weeks if you didn't want it to be just that. There could be something ongoing. Anyway, that's what I've been thinking about. So anyway, yeah. Let me then, returning to hidden purpose and what has the course stirred up for you, I'd like to bring on Jaya from India. So Jaya, you want to come on?
Yeah, can you hear me?
Yeah, I can hear you.
Can you see me as well?
Yep, we can see you and hear you.
Okay.
Thank you for staying up. Thank you for coming on so late. It must be quite late at night for you.
It's 7 o'clock. Yeah, it's not very late. What do you want me to share? I wondered why you picked my sharing among all the others, because it was.
Let me see. Let me look at it. I have a printout of what you said. I don't know. I guess I was moved by it. It was very. I thought it was very personal and.
Okay.
Anything you moved to say is fine.
Yeah. I think my own story was actually that I had a lot of anger about my family. And my father passed away in 2012, and I really don't enjoy talking about the old story, so I will not go into the details. And right now, my family is just my mom, my siblings, and me. We are not in touch. And I have a huge amount of anger about that because some of the events that happened in my family also meant that I chose to not marry and to stay single. And so essentially, I didn't have a family. And it was something that was upsetting me a lot. And over the course, when I connected with a lot of people who've been doing a lot of meaningful work, and one of the reasons I decided to stay single was because I wanted to serve humanity. And I think when I met people, I don't really remember their names, but who the activist and the person, the guest who came on last week, they've done so much. I mean, a lot of their sharing was not about their personal life, whereas my whole story was about my personal life. And I thought there is still a big role for me to play. And that kind of moved me. And I think I also liked Bayo's session in which he was talking about when things are chaotic, slow down, don't move in and take control. That kind of works for me. And it helped me, this course helped me give up a lot of my anger. The anger, I've been angry for 3 years. It is not bringing anything. And I now have a really good relationship with my mother. And I have not decided about my next story yet. But at least I'm not angry. I'm eating healthy. I'm living in the present. I am doing the things that I really wanted to do, which I was too angry to do before. So.
Thank you. Yeah. Yeah. Okay. Yeah. Thank you. Just gonna, take that into the space and, and you mentioned, you mentioned that you want the forums to continue and stuff, and so.
It was really amazing to see so many people talk about things that were so deeply personal. Again, it's I know how difficult it is to come out and talk about this in the mainstream. I think it's also, maybe I should mention my own story a little bit. I'm a little confused here. What had actually happened, it's very difficult to share that in India. My own story is very difficult to share in India. And I think it really worked for me to have people who thought like me. My whole story actually revolved around my father molesting me when I was 12 years old. And in the last 3 years, I actually tried to talk to a lot of lawyers and see if I could go to the court and get, because it was really traumatic for me. I'm 44. I suddenly realized that I don't have children and I don't have a family. I realized that I don't miss having children, but I am going to miss having grandchildren when I'm really old. So that was the kind of crazy thinking going on in my head. And a lot of things that happened to me when I did the sharing in India were not nice. I think there were friends and even lawyers who told me the situation in India right now is so pathetic that I've had a friend who told me when I went out with this story, which I thought was really, really horrible. Although what I heard was, I know a girl who got raped by her father and her friend and his friend, or things like that. So India right now, they are in India. I think if you want attention or even a legal recourse for something that happens to you, it has to be really graphic, really horrible, and so it was really difficult. And it's actually a story I stopped telling people because I find that they're very insensitive to it, although the pain was very real for me. I still don't like talking about it, but I think I'm over the old story now. I reason it out like this. It happened it was a small incident. It happened in 2 seconds, and why do I have to let that define the rest of my life? And there's nothing I can do about what's over, but there is a lot I can do. The future is open. It's wide open. In many ways, I feel so blessed. I've also had an awesome life. I've traveled a lot. I've had a great education. So I think this course helped me to let go of that anger. And I saw a lot of people, especially the lady who came on the course, and she was talking about her husband's medical condition where they had to remove his foot and all that. I was like, oh, I don't think, I felt like I've been going on this self-pity trip, and there are people with worse problems. And it's time I came out of it and became more useful to myself and to other people.
Thank you. Yeah, thank you, Jaya. Here's another thing I was thinking about in terms of the riots in Baltimore. And I also read this piece in the New Yorker about immigration and like child immigrants getting kidnapped, and held for ransom and like all these. Okay, so what was missing in that article, and what's usually missing in most of the news stories, are like the small kind of silent acts of care and love and compassion that people are doing. But, for every, immigrant child that gets kidnapped, the kidnappers now, they decided that this will connect to what you were saying. The kidnappers, instead of going after rich kids, which, brings a lot of heat on them, they have industrialized it, and they, kidnap, hundreds or thousands of poor kids. And maybe they get, $10,000 or ask for $10,000 or $20,000 rather than millions. But, it adds up. And so, these desperately poor families, they get a phone call, hey, we have your child, and we're going to cut off an ear if you don't pay us $5,000 right now and $10,000 more So they go to their community. They're immigrants. They have nothing, but they go to their community, and one person gives them $100, and that's going to be their grocery money for that day. And people like these people, people who are desperately poor themselves, giving what little they have to save the child of somebody else, somebody who's maybe just their neighbor or somebody who's a friend of a friend. That, to me, that's more heroic than anything a public activist does, because a public activist at least gets celebrated by their own subculture, but so much of what really holds the fabric of our society together and holds the space of love for our worlds to transform, so much of that is invisible. You will never get rewarded. You will never get celebrated. You'll never get recognized, even if it's letting go of the anger from some incident that happened when you were 12, and who knows why it hurt so much. That and maybe even speaking out about it, like that seems like it doesn't have an effect. It seems like it just brought criticism but it shifts the field. It's like that story I told about the guy who fought to save a river and he lost. But after that, no more dams were built. So, yeah, I just want to just make that point again, that our personal actions are significant. And yeah, your mic is off right now, so I can't hear you. But you want to say one more short thing, Jaya?
I was just saying that this course actually helped me heal in a way that was really important to me. I don't know the larger dynamics of the course, but I'm taking care of my health now. I'm doing a lot of things that I had put on hold for 2 years. So I was really, really happy. And I think that came again from a feeling of connecting with people who are also struggling and asking the same questions that I am asking. So thank you. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Jaya.
Really, yeah. Okay.
All right. So now let's, I have another one here that I want to bring on. Do we have Alistair on?
Hi.
Oh, hi. Good.
Can you hear me? Yeah.
Yeah, you're a little faint. Maybe if you get closer to the microphone or something.
Better?
Yeah, a little bit. Yeah.
Okay.
And now I can't hear you.
Oh, sorry, I wasn't saying anything.
Okay, that explained it. Yeah, so get close to the microphone. Yeah, so you shared a few things here. You shared on We Are One, Between Stories, but why don't you just kind of speak what's present to you right now as far as where you are now after this course?
I should explain. I've probably sort of been in this Between Stories place for a relatively short period of time, just sort of a couple of years, and I haven't really been able to put a finger on it before, but I've been experiencing these, what I call this new story feeling, which is a kind of upwelling of contentment and love and just a fantastic feeling in certain places, situations, and people, and even randomly, this feeling appears. I'm trying to think of the best way to explain it. What I'm trying to do is make the best of it when it happens. But I don't think that I'd really have the energy to live with it the whole time. It's just something that it then wouldn't be a contrasting feeling. So the energy would be overwhelming, I guess. So what it's made me realize is that I probably do need the dark in my life as well as this sort of uplifting new story feeling. So the space between stories for me it probably is the new story. There is no ultimate destination. I think what I've found is that where I am now and having these feelings is great. Having that feeling the whole time in a utopian world would probably be too much. So, and I think finding these sort of nuggets of light is, I guess, where my gifts are, and that putting a number of people together with these different lights would generate a sort of community of different people, but all together with different gifts.
So, Alistair, I want to offer another possibility. That the new story feeling that you get, and these moments of upliftment and then back into the darkness, and back and forth. Perhaps that new story feeling, or the moments of upliftment, maybe those are not just part of the ongoing fluctuation, but maybe they are a glimpse of a state of being that is your future. Which isn't to say that there's, not sadness and grief and anger, et cetera, all the time, but, from time to time, but that it's like the baseline gets lifted. And that state of well-being is available to all of us that is much higher than what our society considers normal. I'm reminded of happiness research, which shows, in general, Western Europe, United States, the wealthy countries rank higher on happiness in these happiness studies than poor countries. But is that because we're actually happier, or is that because our expectations and our experience of what life is so low? Because I think this came up with, Jody was talking about the people in the refugee camps, who just have like this level of joy that she doesn't really see anywhere else. And my friend who went to Ghana, and people were, factory workers coming out and in their hour lunch break dancing exuberantly on the streets, and he said, I've never seen such joy. And really, like, in many places I've been, it's not that the wealthier countries are more joyful, but it's that. So I think that the explanation might be that we just have come to accept a very depressed state of being as being normal, and then anytime that we are elated and experience real joy, we think that is just kind of some fluctuation or some kind of excursion away from normal. But what if it isn't? What if that's supposed to be normal, and the fluctuations might be a dip into grief, a dip into anger, or something like that, but that the new story feeling is what's normal? Like, what about that? And I think that is consistent with what mystics have taught us too. So then the question is, well, how do I stay in that? And the answer, I think, is that you can't. You don't. It isn't something that the separate self does. And this touches back on the loneliness and the community thing too. And this is really why another of the hidden purposes of this course. This is not something that we can maintain through our own efforts, through trying really hard to remember what that inspirational thing was that brought us to feel uplifted. Those can work sometimes. We try to count our blessings, we try to remind ourselves of things, but I think really what we need is to be held in the new story by other people who are also in the new story, who remind us that we're not crazy. One of the reasons why I travel and speak, because I get this feedback again and again, people say that the people who came to my event, like, they're people who wouldn't necessarily all gather at the same thing ordinarily, but like they like people from permaculture and from spirituality and from this and from that, like different kinds of different circles meet there and forge these connections. These kind of synchronicity based meetings happen, and like that is maybe more valuable than anything I said. Like the people who came are the reason for the event. The gathering, the purpose of the gathering is the gathering. And I wanted, that was one of my intentions for this course too, to gather people, and that's why the forums are so important, you know, to gather people to make connections that wouldn't otherwise be made. And I'm just kind of the you know, magnet that attracts them to happen. Just kind of, you know, maybe invoking a field. But so again, like I said, Cynthia was saying, quoting Thich Nhat Hanh, the next Buddha will be a Sangha, you know, will be a community. We become enlightened as a group, not as separate individuals in isolation. And in a way, like for me, this realization has been extremely encouraging and also very discouraging. It's encouraging because I'm like, oh, I don't have to do it myself. It's not up to me. It's not my failing to not be staying fully in this new story, to not hold myself in it all the time. Like the idea that it's this hard effort, that's part of the old story. I don't need to do that. It's okay. I'm being held. I'm being carried. It's not up to me. Like that's really encouraging, but it's also discouraging sometimes to the point of despair where is this community? You know, looking around at my neighborhood, you know, like where is it? You know, looking around at society, I mean, where is this community? And well, I do have it a lot. I have tremendous support from all over the world, friends everywhere, you know, people who are holding me, and then lucky thing too, because there's no way I could be doing this work if I weren't so powerfully held. But even with all that, you know, I still need more. And I still feel great grief for the aspects of my life in which that holding is not present. So, yeah, so just the reframing is that it's supposed to be this way. The new story feeling, you know, that is your birthright. That is your destination. That is what is supposed to happen, and you don't have to do anything to make it happen. But simply recognizing the truth creates a change in yourself. That's what Melissa said. Being at peace with what's true for you, making peace with the truth, or just recognizing the truth. Yeah, I need help. I need community. I need to be helped. And that is also a prayer. It's saying, I don't know how to do it. I don't know how to do it. It's what Simon was saying too. I don't know how to do it. Help me. That is the state of humility that creates the help. It's a state of I can't do it through my control. I don't know how to do it. And that lets in the help that is beyond your control, beyond your knowing, beyond what you know how to create. And if you don't believe me, that's okay. Because it happens anyway from that state of helplessness. So you don't have to even believe that there is, you know, an intelligence in nature. You don't have to believe that there's a God. That state, I mean, your state of helplessness might include despairing that there is any meaning out there. But that, to use theistic language, that state is beautiful to God. And it brings, that's a prayer that's answered. It brings the help that we need. And so we can just be here together for a moment in the presence of that wanting, in the presence of that yearning for community, in the presence of that helplessness. Yeah, we need to be held. I need to be held. And it's missing. There's something missing and it hurts. And I don't have to do anything about it. Just to be in the presence of that. It hurts. I need it. And as we take that in, it changes us. It reprograms us. We will respond differently to opportunities to bring that into our lives. and that which is outside of us and within us, that is listening all the time. That will hear our prayers too. So I'd like now to thank you, Alistair. I'd like to bring on a prayer. Our second musical interlude here, Rob.
Hello?
Hello?
You can hear me?
Yeah, is this Rob?
It is. Hello.
Hi, Rob. So yeah, you were going to offer us a musical prayer.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Thank you for having me.
Yeah, thank you for coming on. And do you want to introduce it a little bit first at all, or do you want to just?
Sure. So it's called Enough is Enough. It kind of came around in terms of what we've been talking about. I guess accidentally, it was written as part of a competition, actually, a songwriting competition where a collection of musicians had to choose a painting from a gallery, and they had a month to write a song. And the painting I chose was this really big painting of kind of all these different animals standing on icebergs. And so yeah, I mean, I spent a while kind of thinking about it, and then it just kind of came quite quickly. And it's kind of one of those songs that I find the best songs that I write, to me, are songs that I don't really understand in the first instance, and then the more I play them and share them with people, the more I realize what it's actually about. And so yeah, I mean, I kind of got to the point where you prompted this discussion of prayers, and I kind of felt that kind of got to the point in me playing it that I found that it's teaching me things, and it's taken me in my work in a direction that it's made me realize that it doesn't really belong to me. I've kind of started to see all of my music and things that I create as being ode to all of the other influences, all of the other things that have influenced it. And kind of trying to explore where the inspiration for something ends and begins, and it's actually quite a difficult thing to ever have a solid answer to. So in that sense, I kind of feel like it belongs to all of those things and all of those people and places as much as it does to me. And therefore, it's kind of put me in a direction where I'd like to offer it as a gift. And yeah, exploring the idea of ownership. Yeah.
Thanks. Yeah. We're listening.
So you just want me to play, yeah?
Yeah.
Is it loud enough? You can hear.
It's a little on the quiet side, actually.
Do you want me to turn the microphone up a little bit?
Yeah, maybe you should actually just a little bit.
Okay. I don't want to turn it up too much in case it gets too loud. Like,
no, I think this is good.
Okay, cool. Okay. Enough is enough, enough. You're taking it all from us. Just leave this place alone. Just leave this place for us to own, to roam, take back what's overgrown. Enough is enough is enough. Your time sent us away. Place to be, to offer up somewhere for us to come and pray. We brought our fears to north now, as we contemplate.
The edge of all that's hope and your battleground disappears by the day. You retouch your life out from us in every kind of way. And we say enough is enough for us to say. Breaking at the frame, I know not why we came. Is this full circle? Putting all this strain on our foundations into the ocean that our mother said fortune and fame should be a portion blame, or shall the righteous one be saved? She said, cry if you wanna cry. She said, roar if you wanna roar. Please be with me now. Please be with me now. And we'll cry, sign off and love, keep my eyes see inside from above. Please be with me now. Please be with me now. I said enough. Take my mind, go and gather them up. Give me shelter now. Give me a voice to be by my side. Folding at the sea, held up in autumn leaves, our words are carried on the breeze. Change that's rarely seen, swallows sing about, like something I saw in a dream. Our mother's beam, waiting for an end. This time we can't pretend that these grounds have more than they can lend. She said, fly, you wanna fly. She said, so come on now, so please be with me now. Please be with me now. And we'll cry, sign off and love, and love. Take my eyes, see inside from above. Please be with me now. Please be with me now. Said enough. Take my mind, go and gather them up. Give me shelter now. Give me a Lord to by my side. I said enough. Take my eyes, see inside the bar. Please be with me now. Be with me now. I said enough. Take my mind, go and gather them up. Give me shelter now. Give me a voice to be by my side. I said enough. Taking it all from us. Just leave this place alone. Just leave this place for us to take back what's overgrown.
Thank you, Rob.
Thank you.
And we'll Also, you have a link to this, to a video of this on the forum. But maybe if you also send that to us, and we'll incorporate that also into the follow-up. Yeah, enough is enough. That's a prayer too. Yeah, because it's not saying I know what to do about it, really, but it's that feeling of enough is enough. It's that feeling of commitment and surrender. To me, like it kind of conveys is, I'll do whatever it takes. I've had enough of this. We've had enough of this. Yeah, very resonant. Thank you. So, yeah, I think I'd like to read just a few of the things that were put on the forum as prayers and stuff. Rob, do you feel complete? Do you want to say anything else? Or?
No, I think that's it. Thank you for having me, and thank you for listening. Yeah, thank you.
Yeah, thank you.
Thanks.
Okay. So, I'm just going to read a few of the responses to the solicitation for prayers. Here's from Spencer of England. Starting with this one. I made a couple of attempts to pray as a child, and on having no answer, I haven't prayed since, not even in my head. So you might say, have a go now, but I don't feel it's something I want to do or to formulate in my head. I don't have a set idea for the future I want. So I'll just let my heart settle and connect with the world. I don't know what that is. Beautiful prayer. I don't have a set idea for the future I want. That's, to me, that's kind of it's a coded ask. It's a plea for revelation, maybe. Rather than asking for something specific, as if I knew. It makes sense you do know. And if you do, then yeah, that's fine. But what if you don't know? What if everything you ask for doesn't seem like quite it? And then sometimes, something hits you. Someone in one of the forums wrote about, that was Morgine. I don't know if that's how you say your name. Wrote about this practice of, it was Morgine who wrote this. Or was it Meg? Someone wrote about it anyway. Where you just go through, what are you passionate about? What are you passionate about? And then something hits you and you start crying. Like that's it. So maybe the prayer is for that. You don't have to go through the formula of a prayer, to actually be in prayer, to act prayerfully. It's this surrender. Jim Belcher. And thank you, Jim, for being so active a participant. So he's addressing this to educators in the educational system. The system needs a revolution. This is my prayer, my intention. I'm looking for a team. I'm ready when you are. Again, really coming from, there's a place of, I don't know. There's a place of, I know what I want. I want a team, and I don't know how to get there. Help. Something moves, I think, when you do that. Rachel, New Hampshire. Please let me find my role in creating a more beautiful world. And please let me love the world and this life with all my heart, just as they are now. Maybe the intention to do that isn't enough. Maybe I need help to be in that state of love. Help me. Like all of us have that intention, all of us have that desire, to be loving, to be space holding, to be listeners, to be non-judgmental, to do all of the things that We've talked about how to change other people's stories. We all have that intention. We all have that desire. Let's be with that actually right now, that desire. And the helplessness to maintain it through our will. But we want it. So let's be present to that wanting. Antoinette, I pray humbly for guidance on which way next to step to make this yearning that feels like a calling a reality. Julia, my prayer is for intimacy with all things, with the grief, pain, beauty, and my story within me and without. My prayer is to say yes to it all. Back, Chalki, Bristol. How can I use my creative gifts for the good of the earth? May I be given the means to make it happen. Again, I don't know how. I don't know how. I'm maybe learning something from this course about how. Judith Kitty. Hello, Judith. Help me stay at peace in my heart always. Again, something that we're helpless to do as a doing. Which is kind of too bad, because if we could do it as a doing, then we could take credit for it and be spiritual heroes. Heidi. No, hold on. Armando. I like this one. How should I provide for my family? And what I'm hearing here is, how can I do that in a way that feels good to me? A way that's in integrity, in alignment with other things I love. It's not easy. How do I do that? How do I do that? Help. Heidi, how can I invite health, well-being, and healing to the little place on earth that I call home and feel whole and at peace doing it? Now I have a couple I'll save those. A few longer ones here. There's another one. Yeah, this one felt back to the loneliness theme. From Paula from Nevada. About the Course, it has made me question my loneliness, as if instead of cursing at it, as I've done in the past, or resigning to it as if it's a curse I need to learn to live with, I get to question it. Have I isolated myself? Have I withdrawn from people on my own as a defense mechanism? Did I feel the new story was too fragile in me to expose it to others? These questions weren't even there before I started. I felt the space between was a dreadful space. And now, not so much. So just as being at peace with what is true for you, I think is a powerful teaching that Lissa gave us. Also, what about just being at peace with the question, being present to the question? Oh, and Paul also said, to the question, what has changed in you without making an attempt at changing? She said, I'm not afraid of people anymore. The new story wasn't what was fragile. It was me. I felt my resolve, my vision of the more beautiful world would crumble if I shared it, if I opened myself up to ridicule. And now I realize even those who do ridicule are all aching for that more beautiful world our hearts know. We are all seeking interconnectedness, and we all seek to belong to one another again. And that's beautifully relevant to the story that Rod told about his nephew and that whole theme. We all desire the same thing. And if we see each other with those eyes, including our enemies or the people that we're tempted into judgment toward, something shifts. Different responses come out from a different way of seeing. Jan from New Mexico, or it could be Jan. I don't know. How can I compassionately be present and interact with people who express doubt, skepticism, and criticism of the deeper realities of the new story? I remember well what doubt feels like in myself. I also remember living for many years among a culture adamantly skeptical about nearly everything that felt real in my heart, and how I altered my expression and behavior to protect myself and my knowing. I don't want to impose discomfort on others, but I also want to manifest what I know is true. Now I have a clearer sense that my past forays into not knowing were in fact the very best thing I could have chosen, rather than being mistakes or failures, as I have judged them. There's some other really good ones here. I encourage you to go to that thread on the forum. Here, Rachel from New Hampshire. Okay, here's the one. You're supposed to fill pages with possible purposes, and when you find the one that makes you cry, that's it. Well, somebody forgot to turn on his phone. So Rachel shared, a week ago, something reminded me of one of those things that came up, and I started crying right in the middle of the yard. I suddenly knew that my main work, at least at this stage of my life, is to transform my anger. I am so goddamn angry that nothing in my life is the way I want it. And that affects other people. Most of all, it affects my son. So that's my work now. I had so much hope for something more exciting than that. Some ambitious project, some beautiful creation, some community building endeavor. Nobody's ever going to give me one word of praise, recognition, or thanks for transforming my anger into peace. Nobody. And maybe that's part of why I was crying. Yet I know it's vital work, the most vital thing I can be doing right now. And just feel the truth of that. We don't know what the result will be of Jaya or Rachel's letting go of their anger. We don't know what kind of healer or activist or artist they will become having done that. We don't know any of these significant inner acts, inner changes. We don't know what their effect will be on reality. But it's not up to us to know. We don't have to know. And maybe that's what makes those a prayer as well. On the same theme, our friend Paco again said what he's got from this course is learning the importance of listening and trusting what my heart is saying. While listening to bio, I realized that embracing the unknown and stepping into the darkness can be different ways of saying, don't be afraid and listen to your inner voice. Overcoming this personal degree of separation is now for me the first step to take in order to be able to create a really new story. Otherwise, I will just end up reenacting the same story of selfishness, sadness, and solitude. To listen to my heart is not an easy task, as it has always seemed to push me toward uncertainty and even to the unsafe. But to know, as Lissa stated, that there is really no other option is comforting, liberating. Also, I've realized that trusting your heart means for the individual what generosity or living in the gift means for the community. When we trust in life and our community, we also take a leap into the unknown. But once again, there is really no other option if we truly want to live in a more beautiful world. And let's see, we're almost wrapping up here. And Meg Donnelly from Australia wrote such a beautiful thing. I'm just going to maybe quote a couple things from it. She says, describing the results from this course, the confidence I've never felt before in my whole life, that I'm supposed to be, that I'm supported in who I am and how I see the world. That I can express this to others as appropriate. That it is good for me to see the world the way I do, that it is okay, that it is right, proper, and true. That when I see the need for action in my world to make it more beautiful, to help others, to speak up, however small, I will have tools and ideas for doing this. And she says she feels like she's been through an intensive spiritual revolutionary training. That I have a secret font of knowledge inside me, which comes from being part of this course, from you and all the participants. Things feel very clear. I am primed for action, whatever it is and wherever it is needed. So she speaks more about the hope and confidence that she has, that she hasn't felt in years, and gives an example of speaking out at work. And I think I'm not going to tell the whole story, but you can read it on the forum. And I guess I just wanted to, and now I'm feeling the last 4 minutes. What do I do? What's really important right now? I think I would just like to express some gratitude, not only to Lori and Raven and Marie, and to the other people who helped and came on, all of the guests, the musicians, the volunteers, Maya, Rode helping in the background, Alyssa and Bio and Jody, Cynthia, but also, I'm not just saying this as a cliche, but also to like everybody who participated in this, even the ones who were disappointed, but who, gave me the gift of giving it a try, and the data points and the learnings that I've gotten from this. And especially to the ones who were disappointed and also grateful at the same time. Disappointed in some things, grateful for other things. To the ones who stuck it out when it didn't meet their initial expectations, but stayed around to find what the hidden purpose was. But you guys are my community. Your participation, your financial contributions, I mean, they're what allow me to do this. Your feedback, positive and negative, is what keeps me going, keeps me honest, keeps me grounded. You know, it's the world speaking back to me. I make an offering, I get a response. I learn from that. And so I want to thank you for your generosity in holding me in the new story, and in sometimes some of the feedback was hard to hear, but brave to share, bringing me out of my old story of who I thought I was, how I thought I should do things. Like, that was generous and brave of you to disrupt my old story. And sometimes it was hard, but so here I am at the end, invited into a new story, carrying this forward in ways that didn't occur to me at the beginning. That's what happens in the space between stories. You let go of the old, and something that didn't exist in that world emerges. You emerge and you find the lover outside the maze in that more brilliantly lit world, that more open world. So that's what this course has been for me. And hopefully many of you will be seeing what comes of it. And I hope the same is true for all of you, that the hidden purpose of the course continues to manifest for you. So thank you for holding me in the new, inviting me into the new, being with me in the space between, disrupting the old. And for being my community. And it will continue. This concludes the space between stories in its current incarnation. Thank you, everybody.